Well, hello everyone. It's so cool to see all of us here in one room in StreamYard for all of this. We are going to kick off the July sessions of Reclaim Open Online. With this kind of podcast, we wanted to take a minute to talk through our time at Reclaim Open on the ground and in person and kind of show our reflections and then kind of give you some things to think about as we're starting all of our online sessions for the month of July. Super exciting. So I'm Meredith. I didn't introduce myself, but senior sports specialist here at Reclaim. So if we just all kind of want to just do a quick little introduction for our names and all that good stuff, and we'll kind of get started from there.
Sure, I'll go next. I'm Jim, and I work at Reclaim Hosting.
I'm Taylor. I'm a community instructional technologist at Reclaim Hosting.
I'm Pilot. I'm the account manager at Reclaim Hosting.
I'm Chris. I'm the systems administrator at Reclaim Hosting.
I'm Lauren, director of operations at Reclaim.
I'm Noah. I'm the junior systems administrator at Reclaim Hosting.
Hey all, I'm Gautam Narang, junior web developer at Reclaim Hosting.
Awesome. Cool. We've got a good bunch. We all were on the ground in Fredericksburg for the official conference. Tim was also on the ground, but he is on vacation at the moment, so was not able to join. But it's crazy to see like 9 of us on the ground out of the 11 of us. So it's really cool to see like how much we've grown as a company over the last couple of years, and even since our last domains conference in person too. So I'll kick us off. Does anybody have any reflections or anything that stuck out to them in the in-person sessions, or any topics of where the web was going, is all that good stuff, kind of like Jim's background?
Well, I'll start because I know all of you, we joke about the blogging piece, but like I think our opening keynote really set the gauntlet down, right? Or threw down the gauntlet. Kathleen Fitzpatrick gave a pitch perfect keynote about the web and all of our complicity in it, but also like it's not gone in terms of the open web, and you can be pretty. I liked it because it was a hopeful talk about like just, we came to this space intentionally 20 years ago or 30 years ago with the idea of creating community and connecting. And that's not impossible still. And there are ways to do it. Doesn't have to be the blog, I joke. But like, I think that for me was a really nice way to start the conference. And I really love that moment because I felt like, all right, here we go. And I love that blog in big black and white letters is up there on the screen. And, I've been a kind of a stalwart of the blog for almost 20 years. So I like the idea that maybe things will come back around a little bit to people reclaiming a little bit of their writing and their space on their own domain. It's kind of like what Reclaim's about. So that was fun for me.
I will just say that not many conferences you can go to, I think, where a slide that just says RSS will get applause in a keynote. So that was special for me.
I thought it was really cool to see kind of the emergence after blogging. Like, I dusted off my blog. I don't think I've blogged for like almost a year now, but Mo from Grinnell said he dusted off his blog after 5 years to talk about Reclaim Open. So I think that with Kathleen's keynote, it was just kind of a revival for a lot of blogging.
I'm tracking some of those blog posts and I'm writing them. And are you too?
I've been keeping a list in part to do maybe in the roundup, maybe a sort of special July community style roundup sort of thing. I have been keeping track of that. And I was going to say that part of it was going through and just looking at people's blogs and what I could find, even if they hadn't posted recently. And Grant Potter posted for the first time in several years, as well as Mo. So just
Walters
putting everybody on blast here.
Started a whole new blog, which I thought was the ultimate compliment.
Yeah, checking out the RSS and social channels in our Discord, it's really cool to see that kind of been really lighting up post conference. So
Yeah, it was lovely. Also, we had 2 or 3 people, maybe even 4, submit our blog posts RSS channel in Discord is open for community members to put their blogs RSS feeds in. And I think maybe a lot of people did not actually realize that. But we had, with the conference, that got brought up again, and we had at least 3 people add their blogs to the feed in the past week.
I think, Meredith, to answer your question just about, something that has really stuck out to me for the in-person event. And now that it's been a couple of weeks and we're sort of preparing for July, one of the things that this conference, because this is, I guess, Reclaim's 4th conference. It's been the Domains Conference. This one was sort of had a different name called Reclaim Open. And I think the thing that has really just resonated with me since the main event is just how it was delivered and the themes that we had and how much just kind of the pacing of the event, which I think really allowed for that connection, Jim, that you were talking about. And the themes that we had over the course of the 3 days, I just thought it was delivered in such a cool way to have day 1 being kind of having a loose focus on the past, day 2 having a loose focus on the present, and day 3 is then the future, and really just building out the schedule in such a way where there was so, it just felt not super fast paced. I mean, maybe for us internally to, transition to the next things, we felt that, and we, took the brunt of that, timing. But, for folks, I think that were attending to be able to just have time to transition to different conversations, having the unconference day. This was our first time trying that, and I thought it worked really well. And that's something that I'd love to do in future events. And then just, to have a conference after the many years of COVID that we've all been through, to just have that time to, build new relationships and connect with folks about where we've all been and where we want to be, both on the internet and just in our professional lives. I just thought that it was so invigorating for so many reasons. And that's a general theme that I've seen, on various social media posts from folks as well, is just like, being able to connect. And so for that's something that I just has felt very special for me. I'm not sure if anybody else can relate to that or felt something similar, but that has definitely resonated.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my first in-person conference since COVID, so I think that also had a lot of weight to it, and definitely a lot from what we've seen from the participants that, like, they traveled all the way to Virginia for a conference after the pandemic. So I kind of felt more of like an uplifting environment within it. Like, everybody's just so hopeful and looking forward to the projects that they're working on currently and seeing where those could go, and all of that good stuff. So yeah, it was super cool.
100%. And I know that there was this great feeling of just community and everybody coming together in person. But I know in particular, a couple of people have said that this was a chance to either catch up in person with people that they hadn't seen for years, or meet for the first time in person people who they'd made friends with remotely during the pandemic, like I believe Anne-Marie Scott and Laura Gibbs. Anne-Marie has a nice blog post or tweet or toot or something like that is just very sweet, and there's like a photo of the two of them, and it was really nice to see that sort of friendship and community at the event.
I'll add a few things. I have many things to say, actually. So like most of us, this was the first conference. to attend as part of being the host, and then this was a one of a kind experience for me. Two words I will say. One being inspiration. I saw how people were, the second word being passion. I saw how people were passionate about this particular community, how they have been working over the years with internet growing from what it was to what it is. And then that kind of a passion within the community kind of is also was inspiring for me to watch, because yeah, the things people have been working on, and then they have been using our products in so many different ways to do things differently. Yeah, that was something different. On a personal note, yeah, I'll say two things. I think I did mention this to Jim and someone else too, Rajiv. So the odds of finding someone from the same specific community. So I'm something called as a Sindhi. He's the same. So the odds of finding someone that is very rare. That was just mind-boggling to me, and that took me a while to digest that fact. And the other thing being, there were two instances where people realized what phone I had. So there is this one particular Android phone that I have, which is OnePlus. That's the name, and not many people over here in the US know that. But then the reason it's popular among the community, again, that's the word community. So the OnePlus community is very enthusiastic, and they know what that device is. And the idea that I was able to talk to two people who found what phone I had. One of them was, I think, Shannon saw my, or Martha, either of them saw my earbuds that I had, which had the brand name, and she said her son is like crazy about that particular brand. And
That's
then
Martha. Yep, I remember that. Yep.
yeah, and then there was another person, I forget the name, but then they saw my phone charging, and then they realized what it was, and they had the talk. So yeah, the point being, a very tech enthusiastic community to be around with, and then to have to be able to interact with them and see what they have been working on over the years. And then the third day, where being as a host, we had a little bit of time to actually participate within all the events going on in the rooms. That particular day, yes, was very inspiring to watch on what people have been working on, and from the keynote speeches to the individual sessions in the rooms. It was a totally different experience for me, and I loved it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Gautam, was this your first Reclaim conference or the second? Your first. Okay. I could have sworn you were with us in Durham in 2019, but never mind. For some reason I thought you found out Reclaim longer. But I'm so glad you found those little extra communities within like our whole community too, because it's always really interesting to kind of excuse me, have those things in common with other folks, and then you can just talk about tech, talk about anything for hours too. Like that it's just always really cool to see.
I'll tell you a great moment for me, and this is me calling out Noah. So I hope he's not chasing down his exterminator right now. But Noah came up to me at some point and was like, Aaron Swartz? And had gone in and looked up who Aaron Swartz was and why people were talking about him. And it's at that point where it struck me that this conference was as much about us and our professional development and our understanding what it is we do and who we do it with and who we do it for, as it was about them. Like, hopefully it was as good for them as it was for me, with all of us kind of coming together and, like you said, Gautam, getting enthused, feeling inspired, and seeing what passion means in this space. Like, for me, that was the magic. And Noah saying Aaron Swartz, and then I looked him up, and then there's this whole rabbit hole I fell down. I was like, that is awesome. Like, that's it.
Sort of, I guess, on a related note to that, I felt really lucky to, one of my original sort of passions was just different forms of web art on the internet, or digital art in general. And I've been feeling just more and more disconnected from that over time, because it is harder to dedicate yourself to long-term, in-depth projects when you're not at school studying video, in my case. But it was really, really nice and fun to sort of be able to be a part of the documentary, which several of us were a part of. Taylor did a huge amount of editing, and I was in some ways very jealous, and in some ways not, that that you were doing that editing. But I also got to talk to Brian Alexander, who was one of our keynote speakers, about webcomics and also about audio dramas, which is a particular niche of podcasts that I got just really obsessed with. I actually did my thesis project at Carleton on them, and it was really cool to just sort of out of nowhere find someone who was like, oh yeah, I listened to tons of those. Do you know this one? Oh yeah, I've heard that. This is, oh, well, what about this? And to be able to swap recommendations like that. It was just fun to be able to find that sort of excitement.
I guess building off that a little bit, and you guys know I can always fill space. So please, tell me to hush. And Chris, Taylor, Noah, I want to hear from you all as well. But while you're gathering your thoughts, I'll just say that one of the other things I always really love about this conference that I think we've continued now is this idea of an art fair or a show and tell time. And it's always a little bit like, come talk about what you're doing, make it creative. I think we had a pinball machine there. We had, a 90s living room, or not living room, more like computer space in the bedroom, corner. We had poster board sessions. We had a microscope, all these different things. And that time is always a bit of a question mark from the scheduling and planning perspective, because it's like, okay, what are people going to bring? Do we have enough space for it all? Is there, and that is always a really rewarding time too, just to see that buzz happening in the morning and to start the day off that way was really cool. And so just kind of building off sort of the Art Connections pilot that you were talking about, I felt that happening during that art fair time, and just letting folks have a space to talk about things that they're passionate about. So anyway, that's, again, just something that felt very rewarding.
I should have shouted out Wynn, because I actually did get to talk to her during the art fair. And one of the things that we talked about is that there's so much cool web art and art projects that can only happen through the internet as a medium. Like, she showed me someone who had done like a dating profile site, but styled as Amazon, where you can leave reviews and there's a little product description and things like that. The sort of things that are engaging with the web specifically, not just being delivered over the internet. Was really, really cool.
Yeah, the conference was amazing for me to kind of see like folks in this community who, in the sort of wider, ed tech, higher ed, open web, use and reclaim stuff, like that community, in person. Some of them I followed their work for a long time. Yeah, I really wanted to go to a domains conference like the last 17 and 19 in person. So it was really rewarding for me to be able to participate in this one, and then and it not be a disappointment. I mean, it sounds stupid, but like it was really awesome to talk to all of these really thoughtful, smart people doing the work who had, you know, enthusiasm about the things I'm enthusiastic about, right? Like you said, Pilot, like things that are, you know, of, you know, it, kind of like the John Udellism of the web, right? Not the internet, but the web itself and that technology, people who understand what that is and also engage with what it means, like culturally, and how, what impacts it has on us as a society. Like that intersection is really interesting to me. And I yeah, I just really appreciated that, kind of being immersed in that for several days. The it was really just so cool to see people as enthusiastic about that as I felt. So
Just building on that a little, Taylor. One of the things I thought was really cool, and like you mentioned, like the passionate aspect about it, it was just really amazing. Because I know for myself, when I talk about something I'm interested in, I look like a crazy person. So it was cool to also see other crazy people that also looked like that when they talked about stuff they were interested in. So that was just really awesome. Especially for me personally, Brian Alexander's talk was awesome. He I will have to admit, unfortunately, I didn't really know too much about the whole space and what he was going to talk about because I'm still very new to the community and the company. But when he did start talking about it, I clicked immediately with what he was talking about. And he brought up a lot of things like climate change and green energy and green hosting in regards to the internet and stuff like that, that I didn't expect to hear about that. And those are things kind of close to me personally. So it was really cool to hear that be looked at through the lens of like the web, which I had never done before. I've always just looked at it as through like a general like political or environmental aspect, but through the internet, which I use so much, it was a whole nother viewpoint that I had never thought to really think of. And that was just very eye-opening and something I thought was really cool.
And then we spent, you know, I guess it was that evening, our team went to dinner after the conference and spent the majority of that dinner talking about green hosting and, you know, how that's something that we at Reclaim really need to begin thinking about and addressing, because it's not going away, you know. And I think that was a cool moment, I guess, across the team where we were like, yeah, you know, that I think resonated with all of us.
Yeah, I think it's a beauty and a curse of our industry and how much we work on the web. Like it's such a great tool and so powerful, but you also have to take the step back to kind of like think about like what your impact is as either a company but as like a person too, like how much energy you're using. And I think that that's a great move that we're starting to think through, like what that looks like to make it sustainable for the long term, because Reclaim should stick around as much as possible, just with our the tools that we're working with and all that good stuff. So I just think like that the timeliness of Brian's talk was super interesting, and I even learned a new aesthetic. Solar punk hosting or solar punk was really cool. So if you think kind of like how industrial spaces kind of start to use nature again and all that good stuff, so that was really cool.
Yeah, the solar punk art was fantastic. I did get to catch most of Brian Alexander's talk, but most of the time I felt a little disconnected because I was running around behind the scenes as infrastructure, making sure everything was still running. But amazing talk. All the keynotes were amazing, and everything I got to see was just amazing. I have no other words besides amazing. Amazing. I said it again.
That's amazing. And I'll tell you, Rajiv's talk, which was a really meditative, you know, trying to bridge the kind of Kathleen's talk, Brian's talk, and it did it brilliantly. And I was amazed. Like, I knew the keynotes were going to be good, but I was amazed just how well it all gelled. Because, you know, we're not orchestrating with them, but his talking about the colonial impact of the notion of reclaiming and kind of the cautionary discussions around open education more generally, and how some of that has been colonized in other ways, and rethinking some of our ideas of open and what we want from it and what it means. That is a super powerful and very kind of interesting way to end the first day. Like, keep everybody in a state of kind of like, this isn't just purely a celebration, right? These are stronger, bigger political viewpoints that then Brian Alexander comes the next day and drops the hammer on. What if there is no web, right? Like, what if we don't have enough energy to fuel the web? And like, that kind of sensibility seemed to flow pretty consistently from the unconference to the very last session of day 3 when we did the documentary, which was another amazing feat that you all pulled off. That was a highlight for me, is to see the people who were at the conference reflected as part of the conference in the moment. And Mo's amazingly contemplative post, as you already mentioned, Pilot and Meredith, but then the idea of him having that last word with his kind of contemplative questioning and thinking through it was really just a magical moment for me, of like, that's what this conference was. Everybody was trying to think through. There was no answers. It wasn't a sell. It wasn't like we figured it out, here it is. It was like, let's think about this because it's important to all of us. And for that, it felt really human, and it felt really like I was part of something that even in the moment I probably didn't realize. And then reading the post and reflecting back, it's getting greater and greater, right? The further away I am from it, like, the less it seems like reality and the more it seems like important, which is an interesting kind of frame to look at an event that only happened 2 weeks ago.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that that was important to kind of weave together two things there, Jim, that that I kind of have that feel related to me, in terms of, you were talking about like sort of the critical nature, right? Like, this wasn't just like, when we were talking about the web of old, it wasn't purely like, remember that was neat. There was certainly some of that, right? Like 90s living room, like, obviously that's what that was, right? But I really appreciate that this community and this conference, I felt like, highlighted a good balance of looking back with critical nature, right? As well. That was one of the things in the documentary that I felt needed to be at least, included, because some of the things in the documentary really mapped to the idea of, the web of the past, web of the present, web of the future. And when you ask people who work in this space about the web of the past, they're naturally going to go to like, oh, remember Netscape, remember this, and that was fun, and quaint and whatever. But there were some really good, folks who were like, yeah, that was fun, but also like pretty exclusionary. Like, you needed to have this type of internet access. You needed to maybe be pretty technical to post a website and maintain it and all that stuff. And I really appreciated that, especially going back and I'm editing the interview and seeing mostly what Pilot and Meredith did during their process of interviewing folks, and seeing people's responses to those questions. And it could have just so easily been, well, wasn't this a fun look back in that past section? But it was really cool to capture at least some of that balance, I felt like, in the documentary, because that was stuff I felt and I heard people saying during the conference too. Yeah.
I'm also thinking, just off of that, Taylor, the fact that one of the questions that we asked was, what do we have now that we didn't have before, that you're glad that we do? And a lot of people said we have all these great resources for beginners. It used to be very hard to find things or to learn how to do things, but now we have lots of resources. There were a lot of people who said we have a lot more diversity of voices and inclusionary spaces. But I think there were only one or two people, one who I can remember in particular, Anne Marie Scott, when we asked what you miss about the old web, she said, nothing. It was a really mean space. Maybe there were good aspects, but the culture could be very bad.
Yeah,
And
my experience of it was not positive. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna say that. Yeah, and I really appreciated that she said that. So
in particular because we were in this big space of everyone is here, like you said, Jim, in Rajiv's talk, to say, hey, we need to think critically about how the open web as a space treats marginalized voices, so that there is this sort of conversation between, yes, there were good things, but we can't let nostalgia just sort of nostalgia and the joy of all of us being here right now to talk overwrite the fact that there are and there were very negative aspects to experience sometimes.
I think also the documentary kind of helped accomplish one of the goals that we had for this event, which was just to share stories and to highlight different voices in the community. And I think I'm hoping that that documentary and that will become, more valuable as time goes on as well, that it will be a moment in time that we were able to capture. And like Jim, you were saying, we don't have all the answers, we don't have solutions, but we're just here together thinking about these things that are really important. And, I'm hoping that we'll be able to share a director's cut or maybe additional clips from that later this month as well. But I think between the documentary and kind of, having the space for conversations throughout the event, and then by the end, even just with the size of the group that we had there in person, in the digital auditorium at UMW, which was perfect for this event, and then by the end, Jim, I think it was your idea to have folks kind of pass around the mic and just share moments that they valued throughout the conference, and that also for me was I think honestly my favorite part, if I'm being honest, just to see what folks got out of it, and what things that they enjoyed, and again, just it felt very personal. It felt community was a huge part of this, and just to see those relationships that had formed or become stronger, or there was folks had reunited, and I don't know, just seeing that come together at the end and feeling like people could just pass the mic around. It felt casual. I just and I thought the documentary kind of helped reinforce some of that and help folks feel comfortable to talk in other aspects throughout the conference as well. Yeah.
And that was an ode to a conference we held for many a year at getting all my things confused, at University of Mary Washington, UMW, was called Faculty Academy.
That's
and
right.
We would do that. We would highlight faculty work with students, and it would happen yearly. And usually at the end of that conference, the mic would go around and it would be a big love fest. And that's all right. Like, I mean, there needs to be criticality, but it's great that, a lot of people in that room were really like, they liked each other, or they liked what everybody represented and were trying to do. And, it's good to capture that, because sometimes that's not the world we live in. So if you can create a little aquarium of that, like the karaoke, like, I'll take it, and I'll put it in my, fun-loving bank. And when I need it, I'll pull it out and I'll suck on that lollipop. You know what I mean? Like, because that's just awesome to have that experience. And I think that's definitely a kind of throwback, but it was also really cool for me, again, to see the parallels between the work that happened at DTLT, or the Division of Teaching and Learning Technologies at UMW, which was a group that kind of championed the open web as an educational technology group, that many of you probably as reclaimers were like, yeah, that's that old dude and all his like war stories that no one cares about. But like, it was just super cool to see them all together, me being a part of that, and just connecting with them again and thinking like, that was a part of this. It's not the story. I think there's new stories that need to be told. And I think there's a lot of space still to go. And many of the people on that panel aren't going to be the ones who are leading it. In fact, it will be a whole new generation, which I think is even more exciting. And I like the idea, hopefully, that this conference acknowledges that, because Brian Lamb said a funny thing to me because I was like, yeah, it's like a celebration. He's like, a celebration of life? Like, is this a funeral for the open web? And I'm like, no. So I had that in my mind the whole time. Like, I don't want this to be, like you had said, Pilot, a kind of, nostalgia event where we're just kind of, and that's quoting Olia Lealina, who's going to be our keynote for the virtual. Check it out. She talks about a lot of these things and more. But she does an excellent job of being critical about how we even frame the past of the web and how, if there even is a past, which I think is really provocative. So that for me was super cool, was to balance what I valued and what I experienced with these other colleagues and friends over the years, but also seeing a new group emerge for me in Reclaim Hosting that I think is doing a lot of the same things that I truly think is awesome and value. And I could see it, and it was like school, right? Like school in the best way. Like, we were going to school with people who've been doing this for a long time, and people who are starting to do it are saying, what's this? And people who are in the middle of it saying, oh, that's a great idea. And, community has to have people who are coming up, people who've been there, and people who've been through it. It needs all those different elements for it to be valuable. And I think there was a little bit of that at this conference. And more of it, please, in fact.
And I think, Meredith, you wrote maybe in your recent blog post of just exactly that, about how it's important that we have younger or up and coming voices that we're bringing into this community to help balance the folks that have been here for years. And just to have those different perspectives is so crucial to the work that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did notice that, like, as interviewing folks, like the way that they talked about where they were and how they began in the web, I was like, wait, my experience is just a little bit different. I remember playing like Pajama Sam as a kid in the early 2000s on my like home computer. Is like, that's kind of like my introduction to the web and like computers and all of that sort of stuff. And I was like, this is totally different. Like, to age myself, I was born in 95, like right as the web was becoming a new thing. So seeing it from the perspective of someone who grew up in the web itself kind of is really interesting to see. Like, I'd love to hear more perspectives about that, of how their experience as a child of technology would be. And Lee had a really good example of that in her interview. It wasn't in the documentary, but I hope it will be in the director's cut. But she was talking about her daughter and how she's using all of these tools to kind of create some storytelling, and how a lot of the modern, like, the TikTok, like, as a way to kind of begin creating continuing with the digital storytelling aspect of things, and like being really mindful of all of that, and like how they're starting that super early instead of like trying to find it as you go, which I feel like a lot of us have done throughout the web itself, is like we were kind of finding our way as we work with these emerging tools and all of that. Like, I think it's kind of interesting to look at like people who are growing up in this world. So yeah.
Meredith, you bring up Pajama Sam. I think next 2000's the living room. But that was one thing that I was thinking of too, is my experience with some of these things. Like I am very kind of weirdly interested in technology that came out before I was, well, when I was very young or before I was born. Pretty much doesn't matter what era it's from, I guess. But like, some of the things with the 90s living room was interesting for me because I was like, yeah, I never did use Netscape Navigator 2 like that. I was alive, but I was 2, so that was kind of cool for me. But it is kind of interesting in thinking of those. It's a blog post I want to write, sort of like my earliest web experiences, because the web was big and kind of new yet when I first remember even hearing about it. But I was in like, elementary school, and hearing folks talk about sort of like, yeah, I was in college and doing this on like a BBS or whatever, and and all this stuff is really interesting to me, because my first experiences with the web were sort of like, I don't know, there's a big world out there. It could be kind of scary. In fact, we're going to make a whole search engine for you kids. It's going to be called Yahooligans. If anyone remembers that, like, that's going to protect you. And that would be one thing that if we could have interviewed more people for the documentary, I would have loved to hear more varying perspectives on. It was really cool for me to hear a lot of the early web stuff. I really liked that, but I would have loved to maybe intentionally pull some people who maybe were too shy to sign up for a documentary slot, and ask them some questions too. But we just had limited time. Obviously, that was just, we interviewed quite a few people in a very short span of time, so that's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah, and there's always that question that people who've been doing this and have been speaking about it for years are more comfortable getting in front of a camera, and that, like, we know that now, and making it intentional, and then we still have time, throughout the next month and a half to reach out to people and say we value it. It doesn't have to be public, but like, we'd love to have that as part of the story and see what happens. But yeah, I agree with you. But like, the stuff that was recorded, amazing. To quote Chris.
I want to shout out the hybrid experience too. Like, that, I think, came together really well, and that the fact that we were able to surprise everybody with the aspect of having the hybrid conference was really cool. I think that that's kind of like with the pandemic too, like, it's just been a movement to have those sort of events online, and you just can't beat like being in person in general. But I think we saw a ton of people from Discord kind of chiming in that couldn't make it to Fredericksburg. So having that was really helpful to see just the community. And like, even shout out to Amanda too. She was not able to just join us in Fredericksburg. She was in New York for the time. So having her being able to see it all too, so she didn't miss out. And she was also a great help with editing the clips and everything like that during the documentary. So we were able to incorporate everybody in the conference itself.
Shout out to Eric Lichtis too, who's kind of like a 12th reclaimer with all of his support on Discord and in YouTube comments. And if you look at the blogs, and there have been many, and a guy from Australia, Tim Claptor, who lives in Adelaide, Australia, has written a post recently where he basically chronicles a lot of the posts that have been written. And he was traveling, and he was following this from Australia, and he was at the 2017 event. And it was super cool just to see that perspective of, there's the event, but then there's the thinking from the event that's going to ripple. And I think all of us have these thoughts. And, there was a little post, a little keynote about blogging and reclaiming that web. I don't know if you heard it or saw it. But yeah, there is that. We can add to the fire of the web and burn it all down, as Brian Alexander would say.
But yeah, just to kind of, I guess, build on that a little bit, the idea of having a hybrid event, it's a tough thing to tackle, right? When you start thinking about the logistics. And this was, I think, Reclaim's first true attempt at it. And so we didn't want to overpromise and build it up like, this is definitely going to be perfect, so everybody should attend and register for it, months in advance, and this is everything you can expect, right? So because it was somewhat of an experiment for us, and something that I think our team really did prepare for months, and then thinking about the logistics of that while also doing the documentary and just running the in-person thing, a lot was happening simultaneously. And so we didn't, I like that we kind of said, hey, by the way, we're going to do this. And if you're interested, it's very low pressure, low maintenance. It's happening over here. And so, yeah, seeing that, seeing where it did work well was very exciting. And I think we also learned a lot about where we can improve. One of the things that I want to really consider if we do this again is thinking about how we capture audience participation, or that Q&A time that happens after a presentation. We had our presenters mic'd, but we didn't really have session mics that could be passed for those Q&As. You know, and because it was sort of a, hey, we're doing this, you know, thing that happened, we kind of told presenters, you know, in the form where they could submit a proposal, you know, hey, you know, are you interested in being recorded, or is that something you'd be open to? And so we kind of alluded to that a little bit, but I would have loved to have said, okay, presenters, you will have a hybrid audience, you know, adjust your presentation accordingly, because I think that's not something that presenters were, you know, really prepared for, and that's not their fault at all, but
That's right.
their sessions, you know, I think had they known ahead of time that there would have been a hybrid audience, they might have considered, you know, different participatory elements, you know, for that audience. So there's definitely areas that we can continue to grow and improve on, but, you know, just to think through, okay, everything down from the tech involved in each room, having, you know, facilitators in those rooms that are trained on the tech itself, you know, having someone that's fielding Discord for any questions. Like, there's a lot of logistics. And so I really am proud of what we were able to pull off. And I'm also excited, you know, to one day, maybe after a little bit of a break, to attempt it again, knowing what we've, you know, learned. So anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that we can improve on that. Like, just as the person who's kind of trying to envision the technical pieces of it in the months before, like before, you know, putting our equipment together, it was a pretty big challenge for me in that I've done stuff like this before in previous jobs and things, but, you know, having to show up to a space that wasn't ours and do that in was a pretty significant challenge, right? And it wasn't perfect. We had some mic issues. We had some issues with capturing folks' computers at times. Mostly that worked, but there was a couple people that we had issues with that. And so, you know, well, things we'll learn from and hopefully do better. But overall, I was pretty happy. I've been looking at some of the recordings, and overall, you know, it was pretty good. But like you mentioned, Lauren, like it is as much a technical as a, you know, logistics in terms of how presenters, you know, what they're prepared for, and can we bring more participation in too, because I think we were close on the technical aspects. I think for the most part, yeah, there's things we'll improve, but that was pretty close. And so I'd love to turn focus even more to like, how do we make the hybrid experience feel not like an afterthought? And that's one of the reasons we've been talking about this for over a year, right? Since before we were like, do we want to even do hybrid? And I think the reason why, one of the big reasons other than technical, that we said, no, let's focus on the in-person and we can add hybrid on once we're ready, was that if we wanted to announce it and make people feel like, you know, they were attending and possibly even be paid thing, we really wanted it to be integrated even more than we were able to do, and, you know, have that two-way communication, right? Because it was mostly sort of one way. I mean, they could folks could be in Discord, but that is, I think, one of the things that I think we do relatively well with a lot of our online events, in terms of how we mix spaces like, you know, Discord with video, and how we can make that be kind of seamless. And I'm really interested in like, okay, next time, how can we bring that kind of thought process to fully hybrid? And I have almost none of the answers to that in my head at the moment, but I'm excited about it.
So I don't know where else we're going to go, but I will do a shout out for the AI Levine session. I had a lot of fun with, like, it wasn't a conference where AI was talked about a lot. Brian Alexander made it really kind of part of his presentation, where most of his images were done, you know, with like Midjourney or whatever that site is called. With AI, basically, he generated some of the stuff, and that was fun and creative and thoughtful. But there was also the Alan Levine that Michael Branson Smith had trained a version of him via video and audio to do a 10-minute presentation on Splots that he had trained the AI on his blog post. And that was kind of awesome and weird. And then Alan Levine came in to respond to his AI, replicant. And that was pretty interesting.
I thought that session was very powerful because it was funny and casual, but also I think got the point across that it's quite easy to, use these tools to manipulate voices and video. And, it's maybe not perfect in every way right now, but it will be at some point.
Yeah.
And the fact that you could do that while paying cents on the dollar, if that, to make it happen. I mean, I thought it was a perfect session for, talking about the future of the web and the things that we're going to have to address and be prepared for.
And his session, Michael Branson Smith was a bit of a star in that regard. And his session on copyright that came after, I don't know if after or the next day, but that was another great session where a lot of what the unspoken ideas, like how do we deal with provenance and copyright and rights to what we've done, and then training this AI on it. And he was looking at more from the point of view of the artist, which is what he was, and his whole AI Levine piece was an art piece in my mind. But then it opens up that bigger question about legality, about, what you can reuse cleanly, that's someone else's work. And then this kind of integrated AI mashup where you can never really know what's what, kind of blows copyright out of the water in ways we haven't even imagined yet. So it was a kind of a lot of cool speculative stuff without just saying AI will destroy homework giving. We now can't write papers the way we used to. It's that's so freaking boring. That was boring 20 years ago. It's even more boring now.
But speaking of art pieces and mashups and cool stuff, and I'm just saying words, Jim, that you said in order to transition to the arcade, which I think was also another highlight. And shout out to Tim, obviously, who's not here. But I mean, having Reclaim Arcade to, meet up with folks during the conference, and I'm speechless. I thought that space has been transformed. It's so cool. And everyone I talked to, I think, had a really good time. And I'll just throw this out here too as an idea. Maybe we do, in July, we do a karaoke. We have to do karaoke at some point in July to really tie the whole thing together. But, Pilot, you were a real star during karaoke. The games were awesome. It was just super fun. So Rajiv was great. I don't know, everyone who went up there, Ben, everyone.
Rajiv is I'll give a great keynote and then I'll do 6 keynote karaoke songs. I was what?
He had Rajiv was on fire.
He was insane. It was amazing. He had everybody. I mean, the last song, some folks might have left. The last song, everyone was out on the dance floor singing George Michael's Freedom. It was ridiculously awesome. I mean, he was epic is the only word.
That's amazing. Well, cool. Well, as we're kind of reaching the hour mark, we can talk forever about Reclaim Open. I kind of want to look forward to Reclaim Open online this coming month, and what we've got in store for everybody. So definitely keep watching the watch site we've got set up. We'll send out tweets and Mastodon, all that good stuff, and for participants. So we'll have a watch site. We're planning to re-premiere all of the presentations from the schedule. We're also looking to highlight another keynote from Alia in a couple of weeks. We'll kind of do that in the middle of the month as more of a super cool kind of additional presentation in that aspect.
Can I add something, Meredith? Because I'm always adding something. So I reached out to Ian Linkletter, who's being sued by Proctorio today, and I'm wondering if he might do I don't know, he hasn't agreed, but it would be interesting to close the event with a benefit because he might be taking his case to the Supreme Court. So in Canada, and his case is our case, right? It's him being sued by a big evil ed tech company because he shared a link to their YouTube that was not private, and
that they later made unlisted, not
Yeah.
even private.
Crazy. But and he's basically has to appeal to the Supreme Court to have his case heard. So I am hoping he might come give a talk, and then we might set that final event up as anyone who comes, it's a benefit to help him raise more money to basically take his case to the Supreme Court in Canada. I don't know if he'll do it. It was just a kind of hopeful thing. I had something I've been meaning to do anyway. And so that could be the grand finale on top of Olia Lealina's amazing talk. And I had a preview of it this morning. Like, get ready. It's going to be of the caliber of all the talks we saw in the in-person. And that's going to be dead in the middle of the month to really highlight some really provocative thoughts about the web that we say was. And she really kind of deconstructs that in a really brilliant, critical way. Not to mention artistically, because she's an artist pilot, which a net artist, one of the OG originals. So a lot to see in July.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll keep sharing resources of all the blog posts and everything that pilot kind of hinted to as well. But we're really looking forward to sharing this month with everybody to kind of do a full circle for Reclaim Open and 10-year Reclaim anniversary that's coming up this month as well. So just celebrating that as well. So just continuing on with the celebration sort of deal. So making this a full summer event. So stay tuned, keep chatting in Discord, and we are so glad to be able to talk through our reflections of Reclaim Open and would love to continue the conversation. So we will see you all on the interwebs throughout the month. Bye, y'all.
Bye, everybody.